Welcome to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast. This is the podcast that tackles tough questions about relationships, life, love, and loss. It may not be the advice you want, but is probably the advice you need. And now here's your host, grief therapist, motivational speaker, relationship expert, best-selling author, and attorney, the not really mean lady herself, Susan J. Elliott.
Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of the Mean Lady Talking Podcast, and it is almost our 50th episode. Actually, I already had number 49 in the can. I apologize that there was no podcast last week, but I was busy getting the Workbook 3.0 out, and I think that was really important. If you want the new workbook, please go to gettingpastyourbreakup.com, and in the black space it says GPYP Workbook version 3.0 instant download. Anyway, and then a little brouhaha happened in the Facebook group that I wanted to talk about. I actually already had a no contact podcast in the can, and what happened with that podcast was, anybody that's listened to any of my podcasts knows that I sit down, I just start talking. I have absolutely nothing in front of me, and if something is on my mind, I just sit down and I start talking about it. And then when I'm editing, I've realized I've said that 12 times already. So editing can be a lengthy process when you do it this way. But for me, this is the best way to do it. If I had to sit down and write a script, I'd be off script within the first paragraph. So I was having a one-on-one. One of our boot camps is ending this Sunday, and I had a one-on-one with one of the group members, and she was struggling with no contact, and it was pretty clear she was going to contact her ex, who's a narcissist. And the group spent 2 calls basically trying to support her and to tell her not to do it. But it seemed pretty obvious to me that she checked out at some point. It seemed like she thought that the group was ganging up on her, or the group was going to get mad at her if she didn't do what she wanted to do. Anyway, so I sat down and I did a no contact podcast, which I don't think I've done one yet. So I was looking at it, and I really didn't want the podcast to seem like it was about her, because it's not. But when I was speaking with her privately, and I saw that even during our one-on-one conversation, she checked out at certain points. She is basically not ready to go completely no contact. She still has sort of this fantasy in her head. But I didn't want her to ever think that I was doing a podcast just about her, because she's a very special person. She's a wonderful person. I really like her. I like her a lot, which is why I'm so adamant about her not contacting her ex, because she's exactly the type of person that narcissists kind of have their way with, as you will, where the person is so giving, so loving, so codependent that the narcissist can just really make inroads and turn your head into jelly. So that was going to be the podcast for this week. And then there was a woman, she self-published her own book, and she came into the group. She didn't mention the book, but she posed a question that said, doesn't NC give personality disordered people sort of a free ride? If you don't contact them, you're not confronting them about anything. And if you have kids together, you're going through a divorce together, you should be able to confront them. And no contact lets them get away with murder. And I said the day she came in, and she posed this question, I said, no. NC and litigation have nothing to do with each other. If you're in court with a narcissist, the best thing you can do is to either have a divorce lawyer, or if you're not married and you're just going through custody and visitation and support with the kids, a family law lawyer, a divorce coach, or both. But it's really hard to go through litigation without a lawyer or a divorce coach or somebody who's going to kind of run interference for you. When I do divorce coaching, I tell people how to construct letters to the ex, and I have podcasts on how to do that, how to write a letter that if your judge was to read it, you seem reasonable, you seem like you care about what's in the children's best interest, and you're not playing games. as part of my divorce coaching, when I do it, I work with people, whether they have an attorney or they're self-represented, and I know exactly how to speak to a personality disorder person. Now, no contact doesn't mean that you never say anything to your ex. But as I talk about in the books, you have to keep your contact brief and businesslike. And don't get hooked into games and don't get hooked into defending yourself. And I've worked with numerous people as a divorce coach who has had 25 years experience as a therapist, as somebody who understands this and has worked with the personality disordered and who has been a psychiatric clinician, who has been a couples counselor, and who knows this chapter and verse in the mental health field. But I'm also an attorney and I know how to speak to somebody, how to put something in writing to your ex that is going to be something that a judge is going to look favorably upon. When you're writing to your ex, and I go through this in one of my previous podcasts, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but there are ways to speak to personality disordered exes and ways not to speak to them. And I've coached people, and I have said, okay, you've answered this like 3 times already. That's it. Just say, see my previous emails. That's still no contact. When you sit down and you have to discuss some issue with the kids or with visitation or something else, many times you can't wait till your lawyer does it. You have to do it. And you can see the hooks. What I do with people is I look at their emails, I look at their texts, and I can see exactly what the other person is doing. And I say, okay, this is how you want to phrase this. And that part of it, ignore. And also you need to tell the personality disordered or the abusive or the dysfunctional or the person who's active in his or her disease, I'm not going to read this if you continue to insult me. I've coached people. The first time I get to a personal insult, I'm deleting it. And if there's anything of importance after that insult, I haven't seen it. And I'm not going to tell you that I haven't seen it. I'm just not going to read further. And I would say the first or second time they pull it, you say, look, I've told you, I'm not reading any further. Therefore, I didn't read after this word. If there was anything of importance that you needed to say to me after this, I didn't read it. I will not put up with personal attacks, or I will not put up with personal attacks that are wrapped in some concern about the children. I also say you have to make sure your visitation, your custody, and support are set in stone. Don't change it. I don't care what the situation is. I don't care if there's a father-daughter dance, a mother-son dance. I don't care if the son is going to fall into the Pacific Ocean tomorrow. I don't care what it is. Don't change the schedule. Once you change the schedule with somebody who is not interested in playing fair, you're going to be at their mercy. No matter what it is, you might have to disappoint the kids, but it's better than getting into a big legal or emotional dilemma. Don't do it. I tell people that you tell them, unless it's an emergency, something urgent, don't text me, don't email me, don't talk to me. This is the visitation, this is the schedule. And of course, there's always things that will come up. But the thing that you need to do is you need to just stand on everything that you've said before. I'm not dealing with this. I'm not doing this. And then you just stop answering. Don't let them text you. Have one email address where the email goes to that address, and you tell them if it's not urgent or it's not an emergency or it's not something that absolutely positively has to be dealt with right now, I'm not dealing with it. People will say, oh, my ex will always criticize me. Well, why are you listening to your ex criticizing you? The minute there's criticism, you delete it. Unless it's an emergency, unless it's urgent, they should not be talking to you. This is how no contact works in your favor. Not how it works in their favor. Contact is what they love. They love contact. They love spinning your head into spaghetti. They love that. So this woman was completely off in left field, saying that no contact gave them an out, which it doesn't. It's about keeping you safe. The other thing that she was saying was that she was just posing an intellectual question. And why isn't it okay to pose intellectual questions even if her premise is outside the advice in the books? And I couldn't even believe that she asked that question. GPYB isn't just a book, it's a program. And No Contact is part of the program. She said there are lots of people out there who don't really understand No Contact. They act like it's the answer to every problem. And I'm saying that it's not. And I was like, okay, you're saying that it's not, but that's not up for discussion here. Too many of my readers and listeners struggle with contact. Not only do they struggle with contact, but they struggle with being okay with no contact. Somebody in the group said that it's not your responsibility to make the person who left accountable for their actions. She was saying that the person who left never gets to pay a price for leaving if you go no contact and you don't, quote unquote, punish them. But it's not your place to punish them. And you're not going to change them. And again, the premise isn't workable. She said that that attitude was the one that she runs into the most. And she doesn't think that they need to pay a price. And she doesn't think that you're going to change them. But if you've been married to a person and you have a child with them, there are boundaries that are appropriate and boundaries that are not appropriate. So she felt like she should have the ability to call them on whatever. And it's like, knock yourself out. Who cares? But don't come into this group and try to impress upon people who are trying to work this program that having contact is going to be something that helps. So she came into our group just a little while ago. She only published her book a month or so ago. And she was arguing with people in the group. And people in the group started messaging one of the moderators. I wasn't around. She wanted to blow up the NC concept, which is one of the tenets of the Getting Past Your Breakup program. And at the same time, she was saying, well, I love this program and I work this program, but I'm going to come in here and instead of even introducing myself or getting comfortable or showing that I'm working the program in other ways, and somebody who wasn't even a member who has said very much said, I understand what you're saying, and maybe other people will agree with you, but this group is based on no contact as a strategy to heal, not a focus group for varying approaches. And that's exactly right. We have an approach which is called no contact. She also said she didn't like the word narcissist thrown around as much as it is. And I agree with that. I think that a lot of people are pegged as narcissists who really aren't, or who might be very dysfunctional, but they're not textbook narcissists. But I've seen way too many who are. Even though I was a psychiatric clinician, and when I was doing my studies, and then when I was working in the field, I knew my mother, who had passed away years before, was a borderline personality. My adoptive sister also has a master's degree in social work, and she came up with that separate from me. And we both came to that conclusion separately. I came to the conclusion that my ex-husband was a narcissist. Really like textbook overt narcissist. I didn't say a word about that until he passed. A, I didn't want him suing me. And B, I didn't want everybody in the world jumping on the narcissist bandwagon. But I knew absolutely that he was a narcissist. The woman that came into the group said, why can't we have a discussion about this? We can't have a discussion about this because A, you're attacking everyone who disagrees with you. B, you're blaming the moderator for attacking you when the moderator wasn't doing anything of the sort. She said she wanted people to give personal anecdotes about how NC works because so many people in other groups don't understand the concept. It's not that hard to understand. If you want to start a conversation about that, you say, how is NC working for you? She said, I personally feel like no contact is exactly what gives these guys what they want. A clean break with no contact from the ex-wife who they don't want to talk to. And she also said that she believed that the space doesn't add to the healing, it just puts it off longer, and that there's absolutely zero accountability for the guys who are doing things in violation of divorce decrees or boundaries because people keep going no contact with them. Okay, let me unpack that one at a time. No contact is not exactly what they want. They want contact. They want to spin you into circles. They want opportunities to criticize you. They want opportunities to insult you. Are you kidding me? No contact is not what they want. 2, no contact is absolutely about the space for healing. That's exactly what it's about. And it doesn't put it off. It adds to the healing. She says NC doesn't add to the healing. It just puts it off longer. How? How does it put it off? You have the space to heal. That's what it does. And then she says there's absolutely zero accountability because they're doing things in violation of divorce decrees or boundaries because the ex-wife is no contact. That's what a contempt order is for. That's what a divorce lawyer is for. NC and litigation are 2 different things. I'm an attorney. I've also been divorced. I was NC with somebody I was divorcing. And it was good because every contact was him telling me what was wrong with me. NC absolutely gave me the space to heal. Absolutely. And if I wanted to take him into court because he was in violation of the divorce decree, I would have. My lawyer would have done it. She said that she was concerned about all the people out there that didn't understand the concept of no contact. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard, and I don't know why you're so concerned about everybody when you're in here kind of stirring the pot. Her original post said there's no accountability. Then later on she said, I'm not trying to hold my ex accountable. You cannot talk out of both sides of your mouth and get a good response. Not from people who are trying to do the right thing. And she said to me, I find it incredibly ridiculous that people can't pose questions in this group to start an intellectual conversation about methods used throughout the divorce process. And that is crap. I'm a therapist. I'm an attorney. You're not going to find too many groups where you have a person who started the group, who's a therapist, who's an attorney, who has a best-selling book on breakups, and who has a program that is workable and people succeed at it and people are happy and people go on and people love it. She said to me, I told you I found your books incredibly helpful, and I even put links in my own book to your stuff. But the trend of no contact is something that I needed to ask about, and your moderator was so disrespectful. Is this how moderators are trained? To reduce any conversation that might lead to advice outside the book? Yeah, absolutely. When I'm away, which I was actually trying to work on what was going to be the podcast that will be the second part of this. That's what I was working on. And one of my moderators was all alone with this, and all these people were reporting this woman's comments because they were upsetting everybody. Yeah, you can't come into my group and start posting about advice that's not just outside. I mean, I am one of the people that I always give credit where credit is due. I always quote people. I always tell you what other people's books to read. I have a recommended page that has oodles of books, but you cannot come into the group and start spouting stuff within 3 days of you being there to say something that is the opposite of the tenets of the program. NC is absolutely about the space for healing, and NC has absolutely nothing to do with litigation. They don't get away with anything because you're no contact. My ex never got away with anything because I was no contact. I had a restraining order. There couldn't be any contact. What am I going to do? Go to him and say, oh, you're violating blah, blah, blah? No, that wasn't my place. If he got too out of line, it was a contempt order. That's what it was. So anyway, no contact is absolutely about your healing. It gives you the space to heal. If you share children, if you're going through a divorce, you should not be taking the litigation or the legal matters into your own hands and dealing with your ex. When stuff comes up, there is a certain way to word emails and a certain way to not word emails. And I know as a therapist and as a lawyer exactly how that goes. if your ex is trying to play games with you, you have to continue to set good boundaries and have the 3-time rule. And also, if you feel that they're so outside what they're supposed to be doing, and if they're so in violation of a divorce decree, you take them to court for contempt. That has nothing to do with contact. No contact is you have one email address that your ex can write to. That's it. No texting. You block them. You block them on Facebook. You block them in texting. You block them on all social media. You do not allow them to you. If you have to deal with anything, it better be brief and businesslike, and it better be urgent. Everything needs to be set in stone. Everything. And whenever you are dealing with somebody who's abusive, who's criticizing you, who's saying terrible things to you, you tell them. When I get to a criticism, when I get to an insult, that's it. I delete it right there and then. If there's something beyond the insult that you want me to know about, I don't know about it because you insulted me. You have to put the boundaries in place. You have to train them. They don't get to train you. And no contact is absolutely about your healing. And anything that you have to talk to them about should be brief, businesslike, and you should be thinking about a judge who's going to read this. Remember the words "in the children's best interest." I always tell people that. Somebody will say, "Oh, I want to change the visitation this weekend because I'm going out on Saturday nights." Well, just let the kids stay home. That's it. End of story. One person wanted the ex-wife to go to his house and babysit for her kids. And she's like, "No, if you're going out and you don't have a babysitter, they stay here." That was it. That was the only choice she gave him. Either you get a babysitter or they stay here. I'm not going to your house to babysit. What, are you crazy? I mean, she didn't say, "What, are you crazy?" But she wanted to. But I said, don't say, "What if you're crazy?" Think about it. Just say, "I do not believe it's in the children's best interest." And I would say the children go to your house to visit with you. If you're not going to be there, they would prefer to stay home. If you're only going to be gone a couple of hours, you can hire a babysitter. Please let me know what your preference is. But if you're doing something else, like if you have to talk about the time of visitation and your ex wants to drop off the kids late at night, you say, "I appreciate your letting me know what the story is, but I feel that it's in the children's best interest for them to come home at the pre-appointed time. If there's going to be a change in plans, I urge people to not let your ex change the visitation." And I do understand that there's some exes where they're like, "I travel, I do this, I do that, I can't be on a set schedule." You get it as set as you can. And then don't turn yourself inside out to make visitation good for them. Let them know. I think it's in the children's best interest to see their mother or father, whichever it is. But I'm concerned about the schedule that you propose because it's either too late or it's too early, it's too this, it's too that. Say things like, "The children have had a lot of upheaval in the past few months, and it's really not good for them. I would prefer if we keep our visitation schedule very set so the kids know what they're doing. It's in their best interest to know what they're doing. Keep all personal attacks out of it." This is where she's talking about accountability. It's not your place to make them accountable. It's your place to be a good parent to your children. And it's true that your children should have visitation set in stone. Kids like order. Kids like routine. Kids like to know what they're doing from week to week. My visitation was 7 o'clock on Friday till 7 o'clock on Sunday. It didn't change for 10 years. The only time it changed was if Mother's Day or Father's Day fell on the other person's weekend. That was the only time it ever changed. It never, ever, ever changed because he was impossible to talk to. And I would say to him, after he left my kids alone one weekend with a religious nut who was telling them that because they didn't go to church, he could see into their soul and it was black and they were terrified when they came home. And when I called him up, he was listening to me for a while. And then his goofy wife came in and he said, "I have to go. She's mad that we're talking about her brother." Her brother is a nut who scarred and traumatized my children. And you're taking his side? I was furious. Absolutely furious. So where was the accountability in that? Where was the accountability? Where did he feel accountable that I got on the phone, which I never did, and said to him, "What the hell happened this weekend? Those kids are crying. They're upset. And he was like, oh, well, it was my wife's brother. He's a bit of a nut. I'm like, okay, you left my kids with a nut? And from that point on, I said to him, well, first of all, I couldn't believe that her brother took preference over my children. That I was furious about. I said, okay, I can understand your wife comes before your children. I really can't understand it because my husband or my boyfriend or whoever I was with never came before my kids. I said, I might even go so far as to say her kids, since you live with them all the time. But now her loony brother comes before your kids? What, are you crazy? This is how much she had him wrapped. And I was furious. And that was the one time I blew up at him. And do you hear any accountability that he took in that conversation? None whatsoever. And it was the one time I called him and called him out. No accountability whatsoever. He never got that was wrong. And I brought it up to him 2 or 3 times. I brought it up to him when the kids were grown and said, this is how disloyal you were to your own children. I never got through. I never would get through. NC was for me. All of the visitation being set in stone was for me. And any time I had to deal with him, I made sure that it was above board. And if I had email at the time, I would have made sure that any email was brief, businesslike, and absolutely positively necessary. And I'll tell you, in 10 years, except for that one phone call, I don't remember ever talking to him about anything on the phone. NC is for you. It's for healing. It's to keep you in a good space. Now, when I do the next part of this, and I talk about the woman who brought this up, who was in my boot camp, it's not about her. She just represents other people who have skated around on the no contact and come up with reasons why, well, I really can't do it, It's not about her. She's a lovely person who I really like. And that's one of the reasons why her wanting to get in contact with her ex really bothers me. Because I do like her so much. If I didn't like her, I wouldn't care. But I invest a lot emotionally in my boot campers. I invest emotionally a lot in my clients. And I absolutely positively believe in no contact. It is about a space for healing. It's not about letting anybody get away with anything. And it's completely separate from litigation. Anyway, please know that no contact is an absolute tenet of the Getting Past Your Breakup program. And that this is the most successful breakup program. There's actual steps to it. And you cannot do those steps if you're in contact with the ex. And there is no way you're ever going to get these banana heads to be accountable. And going no contact is not letting them get away with anything. And if somebody is in violation of your divorce decree or your custody arrangement, your visitation arrangement, you take them to court for contempt. Make sure you have your ducks in a row. Make sure you have a good divorce lawyer, a good divorce coach, a good litigation coach, a good litigation lawyer, whichever it is, whether it's a divorce or not. Just make sure that you're covered. But NC is absolutely for you. It's for healing. And I wish you guys all good luck with it.